Hey, welcome back, Casibang's crew. This is the second video in our social psychology unit. This one is on social influence, okay? How do we influence other people's behavior? Okay, here's just a little poster there for you. Conformity hazard. Contains possible new information which may stimulate independent thought. All right, so a couple questions I want you to think about and answer for yourselves first. Okay, are you a conformist or a nonconformist? What category do you think the majority of students at Sickles would fall into? Is there pressure to dress a certain way or listen to certain music? And do you think there is more pressure to conform in middle school or in high school? And then what do you think college will be like? Okay, answer those questions on your video notes. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is conformity and obedience. Okay, so conformity is adjusting one's behavior or thinking to coincide with the group standard. Okay, so you're changing your behavior or thinking to coincide with the group. So researchers have confirmed that laugh tracks, okay, if you've ever watched a movie or a sitcom on TV, okay, laugh tracks increase the likelihood that a viewer will consider a situation funny. We laugh in order to fit in and conform with our social surroundings. You think you know what is funny, but do you really know what's funny? Or are you just conforming to those around you? So suggestibility is a subtle type of conformity, okay? So adjusting our behavior or thinking toward some other group standard. So we talk about, let me go back for a second. So there is a very, very famous experiment that we talk about, and it is literally Solomon Asch, okay, this gentleman here, asked people to compare lines, okay? This image right here, to compare lines, okay? So they saw this line, and then they were asked which line was the same length. And this was done in a group, and he had some Confederates in the group that were told to answer incorrectly. So he was wondering, would the rest of the group follow the Confederate and knowingly pick the wrong line, or would they stick with what they knew and answer correctly? So what he found is that most people conformed. Most people conformed to the will of the group. A lot of people were not comfortable saying something different. Okay, they were worried that, oh, maybe they were wrong, maybe they were missing something, but they didn't want to look stupid. They didn't want to look like they were doing something different than the rest of the group. Okay, so really famous conformity experiment. Informational social influence. Okay, so this is the willingness to accept others' opinions about reality. And this is basically what Asch was doing. Okay, this is an image of his experiment. Okay, a group with some of his experiments. And we are going to watch a short video in class tomorrow. Okay, and then there's normative social influence. So this is influence that results from a person's desire to gain approval or avoid rejection. Okay, so we're going to do this. We're going to follow the group. We're going to do what the group does because we want to be approved by that group, or we don't want to be rejected by that group. Okay, so conditions that increase conformity. Okay. One is made to feel incompetent or insecure. Okay, the group has at least 3 people in it. Okay, if it's just a group of 1 or 2, we don't tend to want to conform as strongly. Okay, and these are things that Asch found in his experiment. The group is unanimous. Okay, a single dissenter will reduce conformity the most. Okay, so if there's one other person in the group that doesn't conform, then it's more likely that others will dissent as well. One admires the group's status and attractiveness, okay, so they want to belong to the group. One has no prior commitment to a response. They just kind of really don't care. The group observes one's behavior. Okay, so everyone's watching you. And then one's culture strongly encourages respect for the social standard. Okay, so this is cultural influence as well. Okay, the next topic we're going to talk about is obedience, and this is another super famous social psych experiment that we talk about. Stanley Milgram designed a study that investigated the effects of authority on obedience. Okay, and obedience is doing what you're told to do. Okay, very basic, doing what you're told to do. People comply with social pressures. How would they respond to an outright command? So when we talk about people comply with social pressures, that's what we were talking about in the previous slides with conformity. Okay, they're complying with social pressures or standards. How would they respond if they were given a command to do something that they were uncomfortable with or they knew might have been wrong? So in Milgram's study, we've got some images here. So this is an actual picture from the study. This is the machine that they were using, and then this is kind of like a mock-up or a drawing of what was happening. Okay, so you would be in a room with people in white lab coats, okay, and you were instructed to, using this machine, you were going to administer a shock to the person out of sight. Okay, and it was usually in the next room or like beyond a mirror. Okay, and you were told to administer a shock to this person every time they answered a question incorrectly. And they started out with really just minor, very slight shocks. Okay, so here's our scale down here. Okay, so at first when they answered a question incorrectly, they would be given a slight shock. And then the person in the white lab coat would tell them the next time they get it wrong, you have to move up the scale, and you're giving more moderate shocks. Okay, and then you're moving up and you're moving up. And this scale was on the machine as well. So you, as the person delivering the shock, were aware of the intensity and the danger level of the shocks. And Milgram wanted to know, how far would people go? Okay, how far would someone take someone else's command, someone that they felt was in charge, okay, someone in a white lab coat, how far would they go? And under what circumstances would they go? Okay, sometimes they could hear the person, and the person wasn't actually getting shocks, by the way. Okay, they were not actually getting shocked. But the person that was supposed to be getting the shocks would sometimes cry out. They would say, "Ow, that hurt," or "I don't feel well, please stop." Okay, so things like that. So how far would someone go? Would they deliver this extreme level of shock, which could result in death? Okay, and we are going to watch a video on this as well. And what Milgram found is that very often, if they believed the person had authority, they would administer those higher level shocks. Okay, there were a few people here and there that would quit or that wouldn't do it, but very often people would be obedient. They would follow what the person that they felt like was in charge, what they would do. And it was interesting because Milgram did this at a time right after World War II. And he just didn't understand why the Germans did what they did to the Jews. Why did they follow orders? Okay, why were they so obedient to Hitler when they knew what they were doing was wrong? Okay, so that's what sort of led Milgram to begin doing this experiment. Okay, so here is the percentage of subjects who obeyed the experimenter. Okay, so when it was slight shocks, 100% of them, okay, 100% of them gave the slight shocks. Okay, we start to see a tiny little bit of a decrease when we get to the moderate shocks, more when we get to strong, okay, and then it sort of levels off a little bit. And then when we start to get intense and extremely intense, we're seeing a little bit more of a level off. But this XXX, this real danger zone, still had about 67% of the people still obeying, even though they knew this could lead to death or a serious issue for the subject. Okay, the last of the social psych, major social psych experiments that we're going to talk about in terms of obedience and conformity is the Stanford prison experiment. So Philip Zimbardo assigned roles of guards and prisoners to random students. Okay, he put an ad in the Stanford newspaper and said you'll get paid, I think it was $10 a day if you participate in this experiment. And so when the whole group of men came, they were just randomly divided. One group became the guards and one group became the prisoners. And what Zimbardo found is that they started to develop role-appropriate attitudes. So the guards started being really tough and kind of mean and very rude to the prisoners. And the prisoners started becoming very scared, very timid, and helpless. Okay? And that is one of the, there's a lot of discussion about the Stanford prison experiment right now. Well, has been for years, I should say, but there's a lot of ethical considerations that we'll talk about in this as well. And we are going to, again, we're going to watch a short video clip of these. What's pretty cool on the social psychology experiments is that they're fairly recent in terms of history. So there's a lot of information, there's videos and pictures and a lot of those things that we can watch to kind of get an idea about those. All right, so we are going to watch a couple of videos. We're going to talk about those 3 very, very important social psych experiments in class tomorrow. Make sure you bring your questions. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.